All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick's on the Powers. I thought a good idea for a video would be past Mr. Olympia winners that were able to maintain their physiques over the years. So in this video, we're going to go through some of those guys that didn't lose their gains and were able to maintain a pretty impressive physique well after their Olympia wins. So we're going to start with the very first ever Mr. Olympia winner, Larry Scott, who won the inaugural 1965 Mr. Olympia competition, and he also won the 1966 Mr. Olympia competition. Then he retired in his 20s. And he would make a 1979 comeback somewhere in his mid-40s, still looking very impressive after taking over a 13-year hiatus from the sport of bodybuilding. But it's not just his comeback in his 40s that was impressive. He maintained his physique all the way up until his death, pretty much. This photo that you're looking at here where he's hitting a bicep shot, he is 73 years old in that photo compared to a photo of him in his 20s from the 1960s. So this guy maintained his physique all the way until the end. First Mr. Olympia ever, arguably one of the most impressive examples of a guy that was able to maintain his physique. Now, next up, we have the second Mr. Olympia ever, and that would be Sergio Oliva. So Sergio Oliva won the 1967, 1968, and 1969 Mr. Olympia competitions, making him the first ever three-time Mr. Olympia, and at the time, the winningest Mr. Olympia ever, until the reign of Arnold Schwarzenegger would come a few years later. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2012 at the age of 71, but well after his first Mr. Olympia wins, he would come back and compete in the 1984 and 1985 Mr. Olympias, placing 8th both of those years after a nearly 20-year hiatus from the Olympia stage. So that in and of itself is impressive, but not only that, but after he would come back to those Olympias, he would still maintain his physique for a pretty long time, up through the 90s. Then as he got a little bit older in age, his physique would slack a little bit, but that just really comes with the territory of getting older. But for the most part, he did an incredible job of maintaining his physique after his Olympia wins. So next on the list, we have the 5th winner of the Mr. Olympia competition, Frank Zane, who won his first Olympia in 1977, also winning the first ever Sandow Trophy that was given out at the Mr. Olympia. He would also win the 78 and 79 Mr. Olympia competitions. Now, Frank Zane has done one of the most incredible jobs of maintaining his physique over the years. He is still alive today at the age of 75, and to this day, he still has a very impressive physique. But up through his mid-60s, he still maintained a very incredible physique that was almost even similar to the physique that he had back in the 70s. This photo you're looking at here of him kind of standing relaxed from the front is him in his 60s looking very comparable, minus the lower body, to how he looked in the 1970s when he was in his 20s and 30s. And again, this is a guy that's still very active on social media. You can see him training some of the pros today. He still trains every single day, and you can tell that he's still focused on maintaining that physique, even at the age of 75 years old. So next on the list, you have Sameera Noot, the Lion of Lebanon. So Sameera Noot won the Mr. Olympia only one time in 1983. He's arguably one of the most conditioned guys to ever win the Olympia. But ever since then, he has maintained his physique up until this day, where he is currently 62 years old. Now, after his Olympia win, he made 2 specific guest posings that you're going to see pictures of in this video. The first guest posing was in 2004 when he was about 48 years old, obviously still maintaining a lot of the size that he had back in those Olympia days, but just clearly, obviously not the conditioning. And then he would do a second guest posing in 2012, so fast forward a little bit, and he would be 56 years old, again, not having that same conditioning that he had back on the Olympia stage, but still maintaining a pretty impressive amount of size for the age of 56. And today he is currently 62 years old, and you still see him actively training at Gold's Gym Venice. Again, a guy who works with a lot of current IFBB pros, and he's very active on social media still to this day. So next on the list, you have Lee Haney. So Lee Haney is an 8-time Mr. Olympia. He is tied with Ronnie Coleman for the record of most Mr. Olympia wins. He won from 1984 to 1991. And he still maintains his physique pretty well, although, again, nowhere near the size that he was when he was competitive. But he owns a personal training business today. Still very active. You can tell he's still in shape. And definitely a guy that the age has not gotten the better of him yet at the age of 58 today. Lee Haney has done a great job of maintaining a pretty fit and healthy physique nearly 30 years after his last Olympia win. So very impressive by Lee Haney. So finally on my list, you have Dorian Yates, who won the Mr. Olympia from 1992 to 1997, and he is currently 55 years old. Now, Dorian is another guy that you see that is very active on social media. He's still very health-oriented. You see him talking about all kinds of different, meditation and stuff like that. He still works out. He owns a gym. And you still see a lot of photos circulating of Dorian today, of him still in incredible shape and still, pretty good conditioning. Now, Dorian is definitely not a guy that was able to maintain his size. Obviously, he was one of the first mass monsters ever in bodybuilding, weighing over 265 pounds on stage, and in some cases in the offseason getting as heavy as 310 pounds. But in terms of maintaining, a pretty fit and muscular and lean physique in his late 50s, he's done a pretty incredible job of that, especially considering the fact it's been 20 years since his last Olympia win. So finally on the list, we have the most recent of the bodybuilders that have maintained their good physique. So Jay Cutler, who won the Mr. Olympia in 2006, 2007, 2009, and 2010, a four-time Mr. Olympia champion. Now, Jay is a guy that's very active at expos. You see him a lot on social media. He's a guy that's almost still considered to be a modern bodybuilder. But despite that fact, at the age of 44, it's been almost a decade since his last Mr. Olympia win. And ever since then, he's maintained a pretty incredible physique, not only the size, but the conditioning as well, even though he is a downsized version of the Jay Cutler that was winning Olympias in the 2000s. His physique is arguably one of the most impressive of past retired Mr. Olympia winners, even though he's never really officially retired. Again, it's been almost a decade since his last Olympia win. So that is the list, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give the video a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Obviously, there were a few Mr. Olympia winners that were not on this list, and those are Mr. Olympia winners that I believe either age or injuries got the best of them and they were not able to maintain their physiques after their bodybuilding career. And that is a list for a separate video. So thank you guys for watching the video. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.